Good afternoon, Co-Chair Kulkarni. Just letting you know we have established quorum, so you're free to proceed.
Great. So I wanted to welcome everyone today. Really appreciate folks joining us for this very important post subcommittee meeting. And so we want to start off with just some announcements. We have sent out the agenda for today, and so I'm calling the meeting to order now. We'll begin with welcome and introductions. We'll move on to the meeting minutes, followed by updates from the DOJ, and then updates from our board members, Sierra and Diallo. And then an introduction of the field training program by Post, a board discussion of the outline for the 2026 report, and finally ending with public comment and discussion of next steps. So the meeting will be recorded, and I'm going to first start off by asking folks to introduce themselves. My name is Manju Kulkarni. I am Executive Director of AAPI Equity Alliance and a co-founder of Stop AAPI Hate. And I was appointed by Speaker Emeritus Anthony Rendon. I will send it off to Angela Sierra.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Angela Sierra. I'm an attorney with the California Department of Justice in the Civil Rights Enforcement section, and I am Attorney General Rob Bonta's designee on the board. Let's see, I'll turn it over to LaWanda Hawkins. I think you may be muted.
Unfortunately, LaWanda, we cannot hear you. Oh, now you're muted. Before it didn't seem like you were, but as you're figuring that out, perhaps we will go to Officer Green.
Good afternoon, everyone. Captain Darren Green with the California Highway Patrol. Sitting in on behalf of my Commissioner, Sean DeRee. Thank you.
Thank you. LaWanda? No, I think we're still not able to hear her. DOJ staff, do we have any other subcommittee members?
These are the only subcommittee members present at this moment. We do have board member Diallo, who will be presenting later in the meeting.
Yes, can you just introduce yourself, board member Diallo?
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon. Pleasure to be here. My name is Sule Diallo. I am a designee of the California Public Defenders Association. I'm looking forward to speaking about the post workshop that I participated in a few months back.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And thank you all for joining us. In addition to members of the public and members of Post. We will now move on to the approval of the March 10th, 2025 meeting minutes. Want to open it up first for any discussion. And then if not, we can then move to approval if we have any motions.
Co-Chair Kulkarni, I'm sorry. I'm looking at the chat, and we do actually also have Co-Chair Vieta on the line as well.
Oh, okay. So please go ahead.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Can y'all hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
Good afternoon. Ronaldo Vieta, pronouns he, him, his. I am with Hoops for Justice, and I was appointed by Attorney General Becerra a few years ago.
Great, thank you. So glad you can join us, Ronnie. So yeah, we'll move then. Any, I guess, questions, comments, discussion before we take a motion to approve the minutes? Okay, not seeing any. Board Member Vieira, please.
I'll make a motion to approve the March 10th, 2025 minutes.
And
Okay,
I
do we
will,
have?
I'll
Go
second.
ahead. Great, thank you. We have a motion, and we have a second to approve the board meeting minutes from the March meeting. DOJ, can you help us with the board vote?
Absolutely. We'll begin with a roll call vote. Co-chair Kulkarni,
Board Member Kulkarni, yes?
Kulkarni votes aye.
Aye.
Board Member Sierra,
Aye.
Board Member Sierra votes aye. Board Member Green,
Aye.
Board Member Green votes aye. Board Member Hawkins. I'll come back to Board Member Hawkins. I believe she's having audio trouble still. And then Co-chair Vieira.
Aye.
Co-chair Vieira votes aye. Board Member Hawkins. Board Member Hawkins, if you're able to place your vote in the chat, you can record it that way as well. Board Member Hawkins votes aye. The motion carries unanimously, and the minutes have been approved.
Great. So next then on the agenda, we have sorry, one second. We now have, apologies, updates by Department of Justice.
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Danielle Elliott, and I am a Deputy Attorney General that's working on this matter of RIPA. And
Sorry, Danielle, can you speak up? I'm having trouble hearing you.
Yes, I apologize. Is this better? Oh, wait. Is this better?
Yes.
Okay. I had my volume down low. I'll start over. Hi, everyone. My name is Danielle Elliott, and I am a Deputy Attorney General working on this matter. And I will keep today's update pretty brief. I just wanted to inform this subcommittee that this is the second of 3 subcommittee meetings that we will have this year. This subcommittee meeting is focused on hearing more from POST and understanding the context of the field training program before the subcommittee begins its evaluation and review of this course, as it has done with several other courses in the past. And the next subcommittee meeting expectation is that you will all have a draft that's pretty close to final, and that you will be able to review in advance of the meeting and have discussion during the meeting. But we'll just continue to work this year and next year on building out our review of the POST field training program. And then finally, the next full board meeting is on July 11th at 10 a.m. And then I wanted to inform everyone, many of you might know, but Pastor Kennedy was formerly on this board, and he resigned a few weeks ago in order to focus on other efforts, and we wish him all the best. So.
Okay, thank you so much, Danielle, for those updates. We will now move to updates by board members Sierra and Diallo.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to give an update to our subcommittee with respect to my last meeting with POST. And I'll keep this brief since we have two representatives from Post here today that will be speaking about most of the topics that we discussed on April 9th. So I'll just kind of give the highlights of the areas that we talked about and some other updates. And as you know, and we discussed last time, both Post and our subcommittee and the board have agreed that it would be only helpful to have more enhanced communications with Post as we are moving along during the year on our analysis, research, and recommendations, and to be able to both provide updates to them and for Post to provide their input to us. So in our last meeting on April 9th, we discussed a number of topics. It was very productive. We talked about the RIPA guidelines, and we were inquiring about the status of those guidelines. And I believe we may be hearing from Post about that today, because I do know at our meeting they thought they would be able to share an update soon. We talked a little bit about the AB 443 workshop on creating the definition of biased conduct, which board member Diallo will be speaking about today. At the meeting with us was Deputy Attorney General Marisol Leon, who had been at that workshop, and she was able to provide some also direct feedback to Post about that workshop, which sounded like it was very positive. We discussed kind of at a high level the responses, Post responses to our recommendations in our last report, which I believe we may be talking about today, as well as the status of prior recommendations that Post had agreed upon in the past. And then we also talked about, in addition, we wanted to invite Post to today's meeting, which we're very happy to do. And as I said, we have two representatives at today's meeting, and I think these presentations are going to be really helpful to all of us. And then finally, we continued our discussion about, we thought it would be very helpful if, as a co-chair, I could come speak to the Post Commission this year prior to the issuance of our final report. And they're very happy to have me come and do that. And so they gave us a couple possibilities of upcoming meetings, and we've decided that I would be coming to their September 9th meeting, because that puts us at a point in our work in which I will be in a good position on behalf of the board to let the commission know, give them kind of a highlights about what we're thinking about in terms of recommendations, any concerns that we're having or outstanding questions we may have, and to be able to get some kind of early feedback potentially about those matters in September. For us to have some additional information before we make our final decisions, in November or December for our next report. So that's all I have, because as I said, we have our two representatives from Post today who I understand will be talking a lot about the majority of those topics. So thank you.
Thank you, Member Sierra. Member Diallo, did you want to add?
Yes, thank you. I was pleased to participate along with our co-chair, Andrea Guerrero, as subject matter experts in the Post workshop related to the definition of biased conduct. We were also accompanied by Deputy Attorney General Marisol Leon, who was an invaluable resource. The goal of the workshop was to come up with a definition of biased conduct that ultimately the definition which we settled upon was any action or inaction by police officers, whether on or off duty, that is motivated by bias, whether implicit or explicit, towards a person's actual perceived protected class or characteristics. It was a collaborative effort between many different subject matter experts, mostly represented by law enforcement. We were pleased to represent RIPA and RIPA's interests on the board. It was divided into different sections in which subject matter experts collaborated initially to come up with some draft language with regard to the entire module. And those different sections were First, legal considerations, coming up with a legal definition pursuant to the statute. Definition of implicit and explicit bias, building community partnerships, background investigations, and internal investigations. I thought that our input was received well, especially with respect to the first two domains in terms of the definition, as well as the definition of implicit and explicit bias. We were able to institute some research-based recommendations, and I think that was one of the most valuable roles that we had as subject matter experts coming from RIPA, which were ultimately adopted by the whole committee in terms of the workshop. I served on the building community partnerships section of the workshop, where we collaborated to come up with both communication within outside of the department regarding what law enforcement would do regarding bias conduct and rooting out bias conduct, and communication within the office in terms of the expectations for avoiding bias conduct. Overall, I thought the subject matter experts worked well. It was largely, again, reflective of law enforcement and attorneys. So to the extent that I have a constructive criticism as to the process, especially given some of the focus was building community partnerships, having more input from community members, I think would have improved the process in terms of having that institute reflected. We had a vibrant discussion where I thought that all viewpoints were taken well, and we definitely, even in areas where I wasn't the subject matter expert that initially participated in the subgroups, we were able to give input on all areas of the workshop and input into the ultimate document that was passed on to post. So overall, I think it was a positive experience. I think our participation was invaluable, and we made a substantial impact in terms of the ultimate outcome.
Great. Thank you so much to both of you, board members Sierra and Diallo, for not only the updates, but your work on behalf of the RIPA board, and taking the time to serve as subject matter experts and also having these ongoing dialogues. So we will move now to the updates and the presentation from and introduction of the field training program by officials with POST, and that includes, today we are honored to have Stephen Crawford and Megan Polis from POST to share that information with us. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, Member Kulkarni. It's nice to see all of you. As you said, I'm Megan Polis. I'm kind of the RIPA liaison here at POST. So I, get to work with all of you in some different capacity. So I'm just going to be giving a general update to some requested items, and then Stephen's really the subject matter expert in all things field training. So I'm going to give him most of the time to give those to give that presentation. So I didn't know if you all wanted me to go one by one on past recommendations that we've agreed to support and kind of state what the recommendation was and where we are. I didn't know if that was helpful, or just do a general overview.
No, that actually would be helpful, Megan.
Okay.
If you can do that. Thank you.
Absolutely. So starting with the furthest report out, which was 2023, which I think had probably the most recommendations out of the 3 years so far. The first recommendation that POST agreed to support was to offer guidance to local law enforcement agencies regarding social media investigations or inquiries in the hiring of dispatchers. We are in the process of adding that to our background investigations manual where those items occur, those searches. And then also we are looking to add that guidance into the AB 443 guidelines that we are currently working on that we just discussed. So those will be in 2 separate places. The next one of that same year was to publish any guidelines for racial and identity profiling related courses on the Post website. And if there are no current guidelines, undertake this process. I think it's no secret that we are still working on these guidelines. My update to you today is that we're still working on them. We are doing some more internal review after our last meeting in April. We have agreed to internally remove the section of the guidelines that has the expanded course outline for the MOT course, and also to remove the scenario activities. The guidelines are meant to be used for all racial and identity profiling courses. And I think that that was a distinct conversation as to like what that applied to. So we removed the specific Museum of Tolerance training for a myriad of reasons, but mostly because it really made it narrowed down to just that training, and it really should apply to all. So I hope that clears up some of the confusion and conversation that we'd had around that. But I can tell you we obviously have not published anything yet, and we're still working through that, those updates that we have. Let's see, the next one was rather than its current, this is on, I'm sorry, this is on the regular basic course LD 42 Cultural Diversity Discrimination, the Academy. Rather than its current focus on convincing officers that racial profiling is wrong, Section 2 on racial and identity profiling should be evidence-based and thus focus on the significant amount of data and research showing that racial profiling is not an effective means of policing. Those changes have been made to the LD 42 workbook, and I believe it should be on our website already, the changes. And also in the workbooks are large, so the academies print them through a service we provide to them, and those are updated on there as well. The next one in the same learning domain, the course definition should discuss racism and racial profiling and how they intersect, and should not characterize racial profiling as controversial. Those changes have been made to the workbooks. And the last one was a recommendation made for the Museum of Tolerance Racial Profiling Train the Trainer course. The recommendation was the course should refer to racial and identity profiling throughout the training rather than focus only on racial profiling. That has been completed. And those are the recommendations we agreed to support in 2023. I believe that's all of them. But largely, they've all been completed.
Oh, I was going to just say thank you, but please continue.
Okay, I was just moving to the next year, and unless there's questions on 2023.
I did just have one question about the last one. Apologies. You said that with the Museum of Tolerance Train the Trainer, it would now focus on, and I didn't get the rest of that, racial profiling as well as
racial. There was a concern that the large focus was on racial profiling and not racial and identity profiling. So they've changed it to make sure that it's consistent throughout.
Got it. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Other questions? Otherwise, Megan can continue. Okay, no other questions. Please continue.
Okay. So moving on to 2024, the first recommendation was to adopt protocols and publish separate training guidelines independent of the curriculum in regards to the racial and identity profiling guidelines. The same thing, still working on those. And then the second one there was the recommendation was to incorporate accountability as a required topic in racial and identity profiling related content and post trainings. That has been done. I do also want to say that we did receive written confirmation from the Museum of Tolerance that they were updating their course to include RIPA's recommendations. I believe the last communication that I saw was that they were updating it for the training that's actually occurring this week. So I will follow up and ensure that that has been done, but just know that they did agree to change their course curriculum to incorporate RIPA's suggestion or recommendations. And the videos that they show during the course, those are going to take a little bit longer to update just for production reasons, but that they are going to be updating those as well. And then the last set of recommendations is from the 2025 report. The first one was to formally evaluate Learning Domain 3 and 42 in the regular basic course comprehensive module tests. That's something that's still ongoing that we're discussing internally, but definitely looking for where we can add some testing components. And then the last one was to develop guidelines to assist law enforcement agencies in developing procedures and conduct adequate investigations into complaints alleging bias, and guidelines that assist law enforcement agencies with aligning their policies. It's a long one, so I won't read it all, but we're still working on that as well. And it kind of goes in line with the 443 guidelines and some internal affairs guidelines that we're working on as well. So are there any questions about the recommendations or where post is on the ones that we supported?
Any questions from our subcommittee? I see folks shaking their head no. So I just would like to say, express my appreciation. We as a subcommittee have sought to understand exactly how, these recommendations would be implemented, when some of the issues would be addressed. And so we really, really appreciate, Megan, not only your sharing it, but that in fact, there's been a real clear movement forward in terms of implementing these changes, because I think it, continues to solidify our relationship, and I think help also post to do, its job, and really appreciate what you and your team have done in that regard. So thank you so much. I hope we continue to do this work together, and thank you for sharing that. Should we move at this time to Stephen's presentation?
I did have one more item I wanted to update you all on. Sure. We were asked to discuss there's an item. So the Post Commission meets, I believe it's June 4th and 5th of it's in like 2 weeks. My mind is already in July, and we still have 2 weeks of May left. So it's on one of the rulemaking items for posts updating their instructor's guide to learning activities for leadership, ethics, and community policing. So this is LD3 and 42. So that item was approved by the commission at their last meeting. And I'm happy to share with you that most of it is kind of grammar. A lot of the content was outdated and needed to be updated. But I'm happy to also share with you a new activity that was added in regards to implicit and explicit bias. If you want me to share my screen, or
That
I
would
can
be
send a link.
great.
Okay. All right, so this is activity 5 that was just recently added to LD 42. And mind you, this is all done with subject matter experts. I don't have the list of SMEs that participated. But this is going to the commission in June for final approval, which is why we've started the rulemaking process. Basically, the facilitator is asked to inform students they have survived a catastrophic event and must now survive on an uninhabited island for an unknown period of time. They can select 5 other individuals to take with them on the uninhabited island in order to help them survive. The instructor will provide limited information on a group of individuals to select from. And then they'll divide the students into groups, allow 10 to 15 minutes for the students to decide who they'll select. And then they'll get back together and review why they selected those people. And then after that, the groups have talked about who they've selected to be on their island. Then they give some more context as to like who those individuals are. And it's meant to have a discussion on why we don't, automatically assume, like in this instance, I picked a doctor, I'm on the island, so, I might need medical help. Well, the doctor has their doctorate in education. So, we're always quick to kind of assume those things. So it's meant to start that conversation and facilitate that discussion. And it kind of goes into this, because this is the facilitator's guide as to how you have that discussion and the questions you ask. So that's probably the newest piece outside of some grammar and just some updating of the facilitator's guide this is for the Academy.
Great, thank you for sharing that. Any other questions? For Megan?
And these are all public documents. If anybody wants to go and review them, they are on our website under the rulemaking section.
Great.
So with that, I'm happy to turn it over to Stephen.
Thank you so much, Megan.
You're welcome.
Right.
Great.
Yes. Hello. My name is Stephen Crawford. I'm a consultant with Post. Forgive me, I'm at a conference, so I'm making do with my situation. So I hope everybody can hear me okay. If not, put something in chat and I'll watch for that. And I also see there's approximately 42 people on streaming the device. We can do this a couple of different ways. Over the last couple of years, as I've presented this to different committees and subcommittees, some like to do it differently. So I guess if I come across, or if I say something that poses a question and you'd like to get it addressed, I don't mind. Just ask it or put it in the chat, or you can just wait to the end and we can do it like that. But really, I'm here for the group and to answer any questions that I can and just be as accommodating as I can and forthcoming. With that, in these bigger type of committees and subcommittees, I usually try to keep it really high level, and I try to avoid acronyms and things that are very personable to the inner workings of the program. So if at any point you would like me to get a little bit more specific, I'll be glad to. I just want to be respectful of our time and kind of give everybody an overview, not knowing like a baseline or litmus test where your knowledge is starting from. So I'll say it like this: if we'll pretend like no one knows anything, and I'm going to explain what the field training program is from the state's perspective. So with that, California has an academy process, or legitimately it's called the regular basic course. Some people refer to it in lay terms as the academy. Once the academy is completed by an academy trainee in California pursuing a law enforcement degree as a peace officer, there is a program that's required sub after by regulations referred to commonly as a field training program. It does have some alternate names throughout the state. People call it different things. By nomenclature, the state calls it the field training program for codification. With that, there are some rules and regulations, and I'll just deviate for a second. For those who like to know, anything that I talk about or I kind of regulate or give guidance to, as for agencies or departments, my foundational pieces is California Regulation 1004 and Regulation 1005 and D13. Those are the three foundational pieces for me in my position overseeing the field training program for the state. With that, it comes, a different subset of rules. In California, basically, I would paraphrase it like this. The field training program is part 2 of the academy. So at some point, somewhere in the state, somebody has walked into a peace officer academy deciding this is what they want to do. If I can phrase it like this, when they walk out the back door, they're kind of walking into post and into the actual formal process of training for their limited time that they're in the career or for the rest of their career throughout. So with that being said, everything is kind of codified. It's a two-step process. It's meant to be a bridge gap to harness the theoretical training that's provided in the academy in different aspects. And once they get to the department, a couple different things happen. One, the training is to continue from the academy base, i.e. their learning domains or student workbooks they're called. And I know Megan had just referenced a couple of the workbooks. Just for general information, if anybody ever wants to read the workbooks, you can go to you can Google search it, Student Workbooks California Post, or under BCCR resources, you can find them like that. All the training tests and specifications and all the workbooks are on there. To my knowledge, usually we're pretty good about updating them after every October and April of every year, because that usually follows suit with the commissions, and therefore everything's updated. So going back to the training program, once somebody leaves the academy, they go into a field training program. The length of the program is set by the department. We mandate that it be a minimum of 10 weeks. This has been a point of discussion for a period of time. We've looked at enhancing that, but we also have to keep in consideration from our perspective, we look at the state from border to border, north, south, east, and west, and the myriad of different sizes of departments. You're talking everybody from departments of 2 and 3 people up until you're talking LAPD, the Sheriff's Department, Orange County. So there is a huge variance in size and scope of departments, and also the ability of what they're able to prescribe to a local establishment via the citizenship as far as services goes. So that's one reason we haven't touched the hours. I will say this, everything that I'm speaking of, I can't say this very often, but is completely and up to date and current. As of last week, we've updated the field training program, the 3 courses that follow that, the basic course, the update course, and the supervisor course, as well as all addendums, attachments, forms. They were all updated as of last week, and everything that's on the website, I don't want to catch myself, but it should be as of today or yesterday, is completely current. And if somebody ever wants to pull that down and look at it or discuss it, I'm more than welcome. But kind of proud to point that out because as you probably notice, and when you speak to Megan, it seems like we're always working on something. Something's always in a process and work. And I'll share this with you. It took us about 1.5 years, almost 2 years, to update the field training guide with all 3 courses to establish academic congruency, in addition to the ever-changing process of the academy. So consider this, as we're updating the field training program, we also have to be mindful and respective that every year, just about every year, in January, when new laws are imposed and there's modifications, that we have to implement those and subsequently make changes or variations thereof. So it's a constant process, but in the 7 years that I've been at Post, this is the first time that I can say that all of the material that I'm responsible for at once is all caught up and all current. Now, what's going to happen, that's going to be very short-lived, as though it should be, because these documents and these workbooks, they're living documents, and they very well should be, because if they're not, they become stagnant, because the process is it's just ever changing. Just like Megan mentioned with some of the LD updates, when we make those changes, the revisions, they never stop. They're only as good as the revised date we have on there. So to go back to the field training program, once they complete their desired hours, which can be at a minimum of 400 and or up to as many as the agency imposes. I'll share this. I'll just give you a few things that I'm aware of. The longest training program in the state of California that I'm aware of is actually 1 year. And that's from the time that they come out of the academy. They have a 1-year training period while they're technically in the field training program. As a caveat, most agencies in California right now, and that's when I say agencies, being respective of sheriff's departments, highway patrol, municipals, they're running between about 19 and about 22 weeks of formal training. And that's after the academy. So, and it's dependent upon the services they provide, the county, the geography, just the overall compass and abilities of what they require. I'll share this with you. In the years that I have been at Post, it seems like every year or year and a half, the training program has gotten longer. And there's a couple different reasons for that. And I don't, have any, quantifiable data. We do qualify information through, surveys and research studies through universities. However, as far as, pinpoint data, it's basically what I know and what I see and what I'm being told. So there's 3 things that's happened in the last probably 3 to 5 years. A lot of people have retired from the law enforcement side because of 3% at 50, that retirement cycle that was at one point running. For a lot of places, that's since gone away. The second thing that's happened, it seems to be that California is recruiting more from a national base, more so than just border to border. Case in point, it's not unheard of in our bureau that we get waivers, almost weekly and monthly, from people out of state coming to some agency in California. So it seems like that's picked up just a little. And then the other thing is we're finding that a lot of the younger officers have a tendency of moving around to different departments more so than traditional officers of the past did, for the sake of benefits, pay, overall general life betterment, if you will. So those are a couple of things that's happening. So at that point, so we went to the academy. They've gone through the process, and once they're in the program, it kind of looks like this. We set it up academically on a 4-stage process, but agencies have the ability they can make it 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, whatever they want to fit their academic bill of their agency. Once they complete this program, most places, depending upon how they're set up on their probation, because in California, agencies have an 18 to 24 month probation period once they get hired. So that means even though you can keep somebody on FTO and they're still on probation, or they're kind of an at-will employee until they become off probation. So with that being said, let me tie in a couple of things there. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, about 75% of the people that I'm talking about right now have went through an academy and have went through a field training program. I would say at a minimum, they're probably getting close to about 1,500 to 2,000 hours of training at that point. Now, it really does vary, because the length of academies has such a degree of variance. Our minimum academy that we offer with no extracurricular addendums from the department or a regional training facility is 664 hours. Some of the state agencies are getting well above 1,300 and 1,400 hours. So it may sound disparaging, or if you hear it, it may sound like, well, that can't be a real number. It really is a true number. There's different officers in different capacities that just have a lot more training than other officers, dependent upon specific job description. So with that, I'd like to, does anybody have any questions at that point before I kind of transcend into some of the actual training or what occurs or some of the remedial training? Yes, I see a question from Angela.
Yes, thank you so much. I just had a couple of follow-up questions.
Yes, ma'am.
With respect to the variety of hours, as you were, discussing, some agencies are just very, very tiny, and the large ones. So are the workbooks, I assume they're intended to be able to be completed in, what was it, the 10 weeks? That would be the minimum?
So the student workbook are designed academically for the academy to be covered within all 42 of the learning domains.
Oh, okay.
And that's a really good question, because the way we tie that together on the backside to make it academically congruent is we have what's called our standardized evaluation guidelines. There are core competencies of abilities, skills, given traits, that what they do is they reach back and touch parts of the learning domain to reinforce learning. So I'll just throw this out there as a hypothetical. We use 4 different modalities for learning, and I don't want to sound like a true academic on this, because I'm not. It's just the reality of it. A lot of people don't get the breadth of this, but we use experiential training, which is what they see in academy, which is a lot of the on-the-job process. What they see, hear, and do is reflected through repetition. The next is observational training. That's where, as they continually see things and observe it, they mimic behavior. We do reflective training, and next we do structured feedback. And a lot of the structured feedback is what they've seen in the academy. They've been presented knowledge, skills, and ability. Now it's incumbent upon them to reach back upon those knowledge, skills, and ability and apply it going forward. So as they've been shown it, it's been demonstrated, and they've showed compliance to a certain degree. Now can they demonstrate proficiency in the field under a little bit more high stress situation?
Okay, got it. So each agency then they're developing their program, and so if we wanted just to compare, like, what does a 10-week program look like compared to the much maybe longer program a very large agency would have, what would we be looking at generally?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I'm still struggling with this to a large degree. So I'll give you the today answer. The today answer is the best that I think we've ever had it, because to your point, back when I started this about 3 decades ago, it was very subjective and it was very independent about where you worked out in the state. So to your point, if I worked if you went to the academy in LA, San Francisco, or Fresno, you got the core competency of hours, but when you went into the FTO program, there was nothing codified. There was nothing structured that continued those learning pieces to show validation. Well, we've since changed that. We started working on this back in 2014. It was one of my first projects I ever got involved with at Post, and then here I am today. But so to answer your question specifically, if you have a 10-week program or a 20-week program, Post has built a field training guide that covers everything you need to do. Once you meets that benchmark, you can go above and beyond that as a department. All we ask you do is to defend it if something were to come up, right? So we don't approve it, but what we do is we have a continuation that carries over from the academy. It is in a guide format, and that was one of the things that I just mentioned that we just updated. So a lot of places you can take that guide that we offer and you can stretch it out to a 20-week program and just keep going over and reemphasizing learning and abilities, and knowledge, skills, and abilities through what they've been learning in the academy. So I hope I answered your question, but I just want to make perfectly clear, if somebody goes to LAPD or they go to the CHP, yes, there's going to be a degree of variance because of their style and their specific job qualities that they're required to do. But about 75 or 80% of the training is going to be codified. And I think that's what's helping our profession to grow even more because, yes, departments have the ability to expand upon the training and they can document it. But what we stick with is best practices, what's been tried and true, what we can hang our hat on, and actually, case law. The laws are in the books. And so it's actually a good thing. 10 years ago, we weren't at that point. Now we are. So I get feedback all the time now when I talk to people who lateral to different agencies and big and small agencies, and they'll say that they pretty much got the same training from both agencies. From my standpoint, that's really good because when I came up, it wasn't like that. And I'm not saying it was bad. I'm just saying it was a sign of the times because people did the best they could with what they had. Now, Post has a lot more information and programs available. It's not only codified by regulation, we spot check it and we go back and we make sure that the FTOs are trained, make sure they have a continual cycle of training. We make sure we do spot or quality assurance checks with the departments. I think last year, out of the ones I did quality assurance checks at, I found a few that needed some additional training. So we go in and provide that and we show them the regulation and we explain the guidance and we explain the standard that must be upheld to and make the corrective actions. So I gave you kind of a long answer on that, but I was really kind of proud of that because we are making process in the form of standardizing and codifying things. Yes.
Terrific. And then one final thing, and then I'll let you go on. And others may have questions. So when an officer moves from one agency to another, do they typically do a new field training?
Yes. So,
okay.
And that's it's a double-edged question. Right now, when we updated the last regulations, it had not been updated. I mean, when I say updated, I mean like going through word by word, letter by letter in about 14 years. So, we just being quite honest, we had great expectations. What happened is our workload became so heavy because when you start going through these regulations and you have to be respective, like the language that the attorneys are okay with, OAL is okay with, and also trying to balance it with not trying to create undue burdens with the departments, it became really a challenge. That was the one thing we left off. It's still not in regulation that you have to go through a lateral program if you lateral throughout the state. If you lateral from, let's say, from anywhere else outside of California, you can be a 20-year veteran, let's say Philadelphia or Houston. If you come to California, you have to go through a minimum of 10 weeks. But I'll tell you how departments do it. Most departments, they just have the person go through their regular training program. And the biggest reason why is in the early years when that was happening, they were trying to be, I think, cordial to people and using it for a recruitment piece by like, we'll get you started, get you working. But what was happening is, let's just be quite honest, not all training is equal, right? No disrespect to anybody. A lot of places could do things better. There's a lot of officers that don't come to California that have the degree of hours, and not only the hours, but the quality of hours that we're looking for. So what we were really doing, we were setting people up for failure, right? So an agency would want to hire somebody, they'd bring them here, and either one, they couldn't meet the post requirements, or two, they were failing out. So they went back and they beefed everything up. Now I'll tell you this, I don't know of an agency inside of California that hires a lateral from California that doesn't do something. And there's two reasons for that. It's kind of a two-pronged approach. One, to be fair and defensible to the employee, because let's just say, I mean, again, not all experience is equatable. You work at LAPD where you get an introduction to everything. You can probably go work at most places in the state. If you work at some places up north where you have two officers and you come to LAPD, there is a great degree of difficulty in overcoming some of the challenges. And to be honest, it's not really fair to the person coming in because they just don't have the breadth of experience and the knowledge nor the training. So you kind of set them up for failure. And so that's the second reason. It's fair for the new hire, it's fair for the trainee, and it's fair for the department. If everybody just has something up front where they just basically tell them, like, look, We understand you may have some experience. We're going to make you do X amount of weeks. And at any point in time, there's regulation that says the chief or the sheriff can sign off their designee to be the representative to release someone. So again, if you got a 20-year veteran, they go to a neighboring agency and they're working out fine, they've demonstrated their proficiency in their job skills and abilities, that person can move into a fully functioning officer. Somebody else comes in and don't have the experience, they're going to have to go through a lot more retraining or possible remedial training to get them up to standard.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question, and I apologize if you've covered this,
No.
but I remember when we met back in, I believe it was early November, maybe October, in Sacramento, you had mentioned, and it was made clear that what Post provides is optional for law enforcement agencies. Did you already say how many of the law enforcement agencies in California use Post materials,
Yep.
the field training and others? And apologies again if you mentioned it, if you could just reiterate.
It's a great point, and you're right. I did recall that. And again, the reason for that little, it may seem kind of odd here in the question, is because we don't have anything in regulation that says they shall use it. Now, we have stuff that recommends the use, and it's kind of stands to reason. And I think that's probably where we're going. We're going to have to put something together that says, hey, because who else better knows what the material is than us? We're kind of we're in the same bureau as the workers that are developing the learning domain material. So we all work even if you don't want to know what's going on, you can't help but not to know. But I'll say this, and I like numbers because they give me it's kind of indicative of what's going on. Right now, I have 606 agencies that have programs in the state of California. I would say about 75 to 78% of them are using the Post program. And the ones that are not, they're using material that's Post related, but it's old. And that's going to take me to my next point. So I hope I answered your question there.
Absolutely.
Prior to our addendums back in October of last year, believe it or not, Post didn't have a regulation that stated how long a program was to be effective or what constituted being old. And so this is how it read on the books. It was kind of an archaic regulation that says that once the Post, being us, approved a field training program, it was good until it was modified or changed or a request was made thereof by the department. Now, the problem with that is, well, there's two things. Going back 25 or 30 years, nobody ever made requests years ago because it was such a lethargic process to get it done. The second part of that is people didn't make requests because no one really knew what to do. There wasn't anything codified like in statute, right? And that's where I think this immersion and this growth process that Post has gone through, where we're kind of stamping everything. We can't tell you how to do everything 100%, but we can give you a guide. We have so many, look at all the years we've been doing this. We got, going over 60 years of experience of like, look, I can't tell you perfectly how it's going to look, but I can give you some best practice guidelines predicated upon the Cal Chiefs and Cal Sheriff's Associations of a lot of things that works more often than not and will help protect you civilly, provide a good service to your citizens, and, keep crime to a low level. So part of the problem was no one ever requested it. Now, here's the other thing, because Post didn't request it, Post never checked on it. So around 2000, at the beginning of COVID, that was one of my projects to figure out how many agencies we had, how old the programs were. At the time, we only had about probably less than 20% of the agencies around in 2020 that were using the current, what we would call the current Post material. Now that number is up to almost 80%. And it stands to reason that, we're not seeing as many problems. We're not hearing of as many things because a lot more of the training and a lot more of the information that's being taught and pushed out in the academies is being echoed in the field training program by use of the same vernacular, by use of the same forms, by use of the same training. So I think we used to look at the academy as a one-stop shop, or maybe like a check off the box type deal, when in reality, it never was, to be quite honest. It's one step of an academic journey to help somebody get to a 30-year career, if that's what they so wish. But there's a lot of training that goes on in between. There's continual professional training that's required by the departments, information they seek on their own. But the training that the trainees are getting nowadays is so replicated coming out of the academies. I believe the failure rates have gone down because you don't have some of the oddities. So let me put it another way. Let's just say you pick an academy, any of the 42 academies in the state, and say that I went there last year. Depending upon where I went like 20 years ago, they might not even be using a lot of that material in the academy. It was so far off base. And everybody kind of scratched their head. They're like, it used to be the mantra of, forget where you were taught in the academy, do it this way. And that doesn't even that's not even academically feasible. You don't go to the DMV and take a test and read a book and they say, hey, forget that, just go figure it out. I mean, it's old school lethargic thinking that wasn't even true. It was just echoed. And it's definitely not true today because we have so much information that's compiled and congruent that when somebody asks us why we do something a certain way, we can go back to job task analysis, the training testing specifications, the learning domains, the standardized evaluation guidelines. I mean, it's just an academic lethargic process we can go through. Now, that doesn't mean that everything's perfect because we work in an imperfect world with human beings. There's always going to be a degree of margins for, human behavior. But I think for the large part, Post has a really good understanding and handle on what should be done out in the field. It's just a matter of pushing it out and making sure people adhere to it. And I'll say this, with the creation of SB2 and some of the tracking of certificates and some of the decertifications, and I'll share this with you, this is just brand new, so it's like hot off the press, if you want to call it that. We created a sub-context under the EDI profile for post training officers, where now we're going to start tracking when they go into the training program, when they stop, if there's a pause, if they're going on military leave, or let me tell you the reason we did that. Because in the past, let's just say me, for example, if you pull up my EDI profile, you would never see a course for field training, because the field training program is a program. It's not a course. It doesn't it doesn't have a course number attached to it. That's why field training has never been on the EDI profile. And it's problematic because it comes up in lawsuits. It comes up in some scaly hearings, litigation. And now that people are really tracking their certificates, we always knew that there should be something there, but we felt like, okay, this is our opportunity to use the driving force that SB2 created with tracking their certificates and make an addendum to track their FTO process. So if you see something like where I started at any agency and I was there for 6 months, and then all of a sudden I appeared at another agency for 6 months, and then I went to another agency for 6 months, what that's telling you through the grapevine is I have a problem. I can't maintain my job history. And now you have a place to go back and look to create a history. And otherwise in the past, nobody would ever know. And that's how people were able to circumvent some of the processes, or they would just disappear from some agencies, not knowing if there was any real problems. And now, because they're going to be captured on there, it's going to give people the ability to ask a lot more good, hard, legitimate questions as to, hey, what happened at this agency? If there's something legitimate, let us know. But how come you can't seem to hold down a job? What's the situation? So that's where we're moving to. That's in the pilot stage right now, and probably within the next 3 to 6 months, that's going to be popping out on the EDI profiles, and we'll have to subsequently make a regulation to give it some teeth. to force the departments to track that like they do the POEs on the EDI profiles.
Well, thank you so much for that very comprehensive answer. It was super helpful. May I ask a quick follow-up to that?
Yes, ma'am.
Which
Yes,
is,
ma'am.
and you began to answer it a little bit. So you said 75 to 78% use post. The other ones use older materials. I guess my question is sort of the why. Why don't they use post? So you're saying about 22 to 25% don't. So
Yeah,
I just wanted to understand that because I mean, it does seem like your materials are so comprehensive. And I will make one sort of editorial comment, which is that, you know, folks like Angela and I have to do MCLE as lawyers to continue our legal training because yes, you know, years go by since you attended law school and the law does change. And so we have to keep abreast of that. Same thing, you know, for my sister who's a physician, she has to go through CME, continuing medical education, because that information also has changed. There's newer research that's done. So I really appreciate your earlier comment about that because yes, things change and it's important for officers also in their professional duty to be on top of that. But back to my question about why they choose not to.
Yeah, and like I said, it was two-pronged. One is we didn't have the really the teeth before to do it, and now we do. And then the second part of it, just being completely honest, we're just so far behind that when you're talking about that many departments, we have to. So what I'm to answer your question, what am I doing to correct it? Well, me and my staff, we've sent out as of last week 126 letters of notification saying, "Hi, I'm Steve Crawford. If you don't know, I oversee the field training program. Due to new regulation, your program is deemed to be needing some update. Please contact me by this date for to make things better." And that's where we're working with them. And so what we're trying to do, I'm getting about 15 to 20 a month done like that. We anticipate probably July to next August or September, we probably should be called up. And then what'll happen is it'll just be through attrition. Now, what we did do, I left it off on purpose because I kind of thought we'd be going down this path, is when we created the regulation that now says we're going to post is going to get more involved and we're going to hold you to a higher standard. But what is the standard? And so we came up with an 8-year mark. So we had to benchmark it somewhere. Most places or most people or most feedback we got wanted to put it at 4 years. To be quite honest, we don't have the staff at Post right now to do it every 4 years because if you just do the numbers, there's 606 programs. If you did it every 4 years and look at the numbers plus everything else that we're responsible for, it's just too much. So we made it an 8-year benchmark. So those who, like, for example, if they have an old program today and we get it called up completely up to date, they will have 8 years before we look at it again. So I'll say this, is it the best? I don't know if it's the best, but I will tell you this, it's a lot better than what we had before, which was nothing. And at least we have a line in the sand now that puts a litmus test down that says, this is the furthest we'll go out. But we're also throwing it out with the caveat and the stipulation that you don't have to wait 8 years. If something comes up or changes, or we spot check, or you get a new executive staff and they want to put their influence on it, that's fine. We can always do it sooner. But now we've basically drawn a line in the sand and saying, look, we're going to be more inquisitive about what your manuals say every so often to make sure that you're following standards. Because the reality is, if you don't, you'll just outdate yourself by the academy. Because if you figure the academy changes twice a year at a minimum, and then you do that times 15 or 20 years, it's very easy to get behind. So that's the reason why.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Any other questions so far based upon what we've discussed? So lastly, I'll kind of touch base about how it works. So every department who has an FTO program, they have like a subculture within their department. CHP here, they have their FTEP program. So they have their normal working department, and then they're going to have their cadre of FTOs, the training officers. They're going to have sergeants that oversee them up and down the state, and then they're going to have lieutenants who oversee the program. And it's a built-in hierarchy, just like anything else. And what we're doing new. I would say we're probably doing more spot checks than we ever did before. We're looking at recent updates. Something that we're really trying to go to and figure out a way to do is to get some more quality control based upon past failure rates. That would be good because they do vary at different departments for different reasons. And if you've never heard this, I'll share this with you. A lot more sheriff's departments have higher failure rates from what I see in the FTO program than any other departments. And the reason is because a lot of the sheriff's departments have mandatory curriculum that states they got to provide services to the jail and the court services. So many of their new personnel that are hired, they're used to backfill the jail initially. And in some cases, if you come out of the academy and you get put in the jail or court services or bailiff position, not that it's a bad thing, it's a product of growth, but you're not doing what you went to class on in the academy. It would almost be like going to law school, but when you come out of law school, they don't have you doing law-related material, they have you doing something else. And then 3 years down the road, it's like, hey, remember this? And that's why the failure rates are so high. Then they say, hey, take the bar exam 4 years later. Well, that's why it's so high. Some places are making some changes. They're having people go to the FTO program beforehand a lot sooner, or work them in the process just to work on mitigating the attrition rate. And also, it's a way to sustain your wellness program through your department by showing people that we're not just putting you in a jail because you're a person, we need a body there. We're also, we're invested into you, and we know that eventually you're going to come out and provide a service to the public in the street. But we're trying to do two things at one time. So that's one little caveat about the sheriff's department. So, but other than that, they have their own subculture. And then what I do is on the tail end of this, I offer a basic course for all FTOs. Prior to any FTOs becoming a FTO, they have to go through a 40-hour course. And then after that, every 3 years, they must go to a 24-hour update course. And then any supervisors that oversee the program, they must go to a 24-hour course. And we do regulate and spot check that for quality assurance. And that's how we kind of keep the process ongoing and evolving. And in the middle of all that, like I mentioned in the beginning of this, it's as soon as we get something basically caught up or current, it's going to become a lagnet because there's already new bills and new legislation coming forward for January. So as soon as we get caught up, we're kind of looking to become behind. So if that makes sense. So I'll kind of wrap it up with that. Like I said, I try to keep it pretty high level and touch upon some stuff that you probably want to know. A couple other things that we're currently doing, like the EDI process, which I think is great. It's going to give us the ability to track, FTOs and supervisors. And also too, we, just so you know, we really had to do something because as a part of SB2, there's a government code section, 7286B18, that stipulates that training officers, if they've had any sustained abuse of force, cannot train people. So that's something we check for. And I just off the top of my head, I can think of, I think there's 2 people in the state right now that were removed as training officers due to that provision that was stipulated. So it's another way that SB2 is working backwards. And also too, what we've done is we've incorporated some of the schematic outlines of SB2, what it is, how it works, and some of the general, what we've learned so far in all 3 of our basic FTO courses. to try to educate, permeate the process throughout the ranks going forward.
Great. Thank you so much for that detailed presentation. Was really helpful. Angela, you had a question or comment?
Yes, yes, and thank you so much. A question I had, and again, just even at a high level, could you talk a little bit about to what extent the field training program focuses on issues related to racial and identity profiling? And
How does it-
if you have any suggestions of what we should be looking at in that respect.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I don't hear too much about it. And from my perspective, at my level, generally, there's kind of like the big three or the big five. Report writing is usually one of the 3 or 4 that always give people problems. Geography, depending upon where they go. The biggest thing, probably the biggest thing we're dealing with right now is, and just, not being disrespectful to any culture, is just the younger generation being able to do something like we're doing now, get on a screen or sit down and have a face-to-face conversation and be able to communicate, effectively to express your point or, listen to someone else's viewpoint. They're really good. Like my son, he's really good on the computer. And sometimes he doesn't want to look me in the eye when we talk, and it drives me crazy. And when you go out to the public, some of the public feels disrespected, and they take it different ways. And all it is just someone who's culturally deficient in an area that they've never been taught. That is the biggest problem we're seeing right now. And I guess you could probably throw it under a box of like professionalism. There's just such a degree of lack of overall general, what you describe as attributes of professionalism. And it's not that the young kids are trying to do anything wrong. They're extremely hard workers. There's just great quality people, and they're as bright as they've ever been. It's just having that one-on-one conversation just kind of throws the day in a jar. Specifically, related to your point, I have never heard of anything since I've been at Post related anything to race. Most people, and just being honest, most people are on probation. It's a paramilitary structure. They're so afraid of not being able to figure out where they're going or not, memorizing all the tests, that stuff of that nature. It just doesn't usually pop up. People are so nervous about making, traffic stops and being able to communicate someone. The last thing they can tell you is half the time they can't even identify people. They don't even know. I just don't hear it that much. I know that's why some of the verbiage was changed, like Megan had related to, but we do have, and I'm glad you mentioned this. We felt it important in what we call volume 2 of our sign-off portion, section 6, volume 2. And I had Megan give that to you guys. If you didn't get it, let me know. But we have 5 or 6 sections where we talk about the 4th and the 14th Amendment, talk about diversity, community relationships, talking about the agency's racial profiling policy. But everything that we pull from there, it's no hidden secret. We got it out of the LD 42 because LD 42 is our foundational piece. So again, like 20 or 25 years ago, if somebody didn't get that in the academy, it was lost. Now, if they didn't get it, it's being reemphasized and it's in a sign-off portion. So let's say somebody did have an issue with that and it became a proponent and they were to call me, I could tell them, hey, if you pull up section 6 and see how they're signing off, if they're actually doing things they're not supposed to, and it's reflected on their daily observation report, I can tell you in the academy where they got it, that means they're not performing to standards. So that's a problem. So we do have a mechanisms in place. I guess it wouldn't be so much as a stopgap, but it would be to reiterate previously provide information about what is and what is not tolerated.
Got it. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I actually have 2 follow-up questions to that. One is when you mentioned the term paramilitary, can you explain what you mean in this context by that? And then I also have a second question.
Yeah, by nature, law enforcement is a paramilitary organization.
So I see. So you're referencing all law enforcement, not
Yes.
individuals.
Right.
Okay. My other question then is, one thing I saw as part of participating in the events last fall, apologies, I've forgotten the name of that post-training or review. A number of individuals who were field trainers were under the misunderstanding that that individual data was shared, including names of officers, et cetera, as opposed to being provided in the aggregate. And so, you know, a number of us were concerned about that because A, it's simply not true. I think when we had that discussion, it was very fruitful. So I'm wondering, one is how do we highlight that or uplift that in the field training, as well as in the academy? And what can we do to make sure that those who conduct the field training are also aware of this, and make sure it's very, very clear that they communicate it, right? Because I think that certainly if individual officers are under that belief, which is factually inaccurate, that their individual information is shared, then they would be reticent. They would to be involved in it. They would show resistance to RIPA and all that we're trying to do. So we really, those of us who are on the RIPA board, saw this as really foundational to changing our relationship with officers.
Okay, so just for my clarification, are you talking about the way the data is collected from the departments? Is that what you're referring to?
Right.
Yeah, and I don't want to I hate to, cast things off, but we don't, the field training program has nothing to do with that. And agencies, they're given direction as to how to do it, like the Highway Patrol, they're one of the biggest agencies. They collect a ton of data. I wouldn't even know. I know back before I retired, they weren't giving out our information. I don't know where that came from or how it got started. Actually, I wouldn't even be the best one to talk to about that. I think probably somebody from some of the active departments may be better to represent that, or even somebody that's connected to a department who has some connectivity to their labor organization, and so that, because there's certain requirements they're required to submit. So I wouldn't be the person. I'm not trying to get out of that. That wouldn't be under my purview, because in the FTO program, we don't have anything to do with that at all.
Right. Well, I guess what I'm asking is, could you include that in your materials and in the trainer? Because it does seem important for officers, each and every officer of the 606 agencies should be aware of that fact, that all of this information is only shared in the aggregate. At no time does anyone who's part of RIPA have access to individualized information. And that by itself is creating fear, anxiety, reticence to participating. And in some really strong cases, it has even caused some police departments to provide fraudulent data. So that's what I would share.
Yeah. I see Megan raised her hand. What I would suggest, because I'm just a worker here, maybe I can mediate through Megan, and then give me some of your specifics, and we can look at it and try to accommodate you the best we can. Megan, did you have something to add on that, ma'am?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I'm not sure that something like this belongs in the field training program, but it's definitely something that we could definitely discuss further and see where that would be more appropriate. But I'm not sure that field training is where that belongs, but definitely a discussion we can have.
Thank you. Other questions?
I did want to point out that we posted just a little bit of clarification on the field training program in the chat with the link to the commission procedures on that. So the field training program is required by all agencies that participate in the post program. It's the guide that Stephen's been talking about that is optional. So just to clarify that and just to let you know that it's there in the chat to access.
Thank you. Well, if there's nothing else, then I want to again thank Megan and Stephen for their presentations today and for taking our questions. Really appreciate the work that you all have done, and you're sharing it with us at today's subcommittee meeting. I wanted to suggest, and I know that it is not on the agenda, but we have been meeting for about an hour and a half. If we could take a 10-minute break so that folks can just step away for water or to grab some food before we move on. So if that's okay, maybe I will suggest then adding like maybe 2 minutes to that, so we come back at about 1:40. DOJ, would that be okay?
Absolutely. We can come back at 1:40.
Great. Well, thank you all, and we will turn our cameras off, take a 12-minute break, and join back at 1:40. Thank you.
10:30.
Hi, everyone. Now that we're approaching 1:40, I'm going to ask that all board members that are present, please turn your cameras on so we know who is present, and then we can resume as soon as we have quorum. I think we still have all the board members that we had previously. Let me just double check. Board Member Hawkins, are you able to turn your camera on?
And do we have a co-chair on still, or did he have to drop?
I believe Co-Chair Rieta had to leave early, so he's no longer on the meeting.
Okay, got it.
It is showing that we do have quorum with Board Member Hawkins present. So I believe we're able to go ahead and rejoin the meeting.
Great, thank you so much. Really appreciate that. And so now we will move to the board discussion of the outline for the 2026 report. Is that correct, Yasmin?
That's correct.
Okay, great. Do we have Danielle and Marisol leading our conversation today?
Yes, the two of
And
us.
Aisha? Okay,
Aisha
great,
will
thank you.
lead it. Yasmin, Yasi, I think you were gonna take charge of the PowerPoint.
Pulling it up now. Sorry, I'm having a little bit of Teams trouble.
Yeah, see, I can also do that if you need help.
Okay,
Are you all
great.
able to see the screen currently? Let me see if I can get it into presentation view.
Yes.
Are you all able to see? Perfect.
Yes, thank you so much, Yasi. Really appreciate it. And good afternoon, everyone. My name is Marisol Leon, and I am a Deputy Attorney General with the Civil Rights Enforcement Section of the California DOJ, based in our LA office. And presenting with me today is Deputy Attorney General Daniel Elliott and Staff Services Manager Aisha Martin Walton. And as you all know, AB 953 directs the Commission on Peace Officer Standards and Training, POST, to consult with the RIPA board regarding the development of training for all peace officers that prescribes evidence-based patterns, practices, and protocols that prevent racial and identity profiling. And since RIPA's enactment, the board has reviewed 7 post-certified courses. And as Megan discussed earlier today, POST guidelines on racial and identity profiling. And the RIPA board has also made recommendations to align those courses with RIPA's goal of eliminating racial and identity profiling. And as we heard earlier today, Post is working on aligning those guidelines with all its courses. And so the Post section of this year's report will address the board's ongoing collaboration with Post. And first, it will detail Post's response to prior RIPA recommendations, those from 2025 and years prior. And as Megan presented today, it sounds like a lot of these recommendations have been implemented or are being worked on currently so that they can be implemented, which is great news. And next in the report, we will provide an overview of the board's participation in 2 Post-sponsored workshops, which you've heard about today. The first is the AB 953 workshop on guidelines on racial and identity profiling, and the second is on AB 443, which board member Diallo presented on, and was to develop guidelines and develop the definition of biased conduct. And in August of 2023, Post agreed to the board's prior recommendation to develop racial and identity profiling guidelines and included the board members or some board members in the development of those guidelines in May and October of 2024. And these guidelines on racial and identity profiling are an opportunity to align all law enforcement training to more effectively tackle barriers and to eliminating racial and identity profiling by individual officers and law enforcement agencies. And in March of this year, Post invited board members to attend the AB 9443 workshop, as you heard earlier today, where about 15 subject matter experts from throughout the state of California developed the definition of biased conduct that will impact law enforcement agencies' background assessments and internal affairs investigations that allege biased conduct. And so in this year's report, after reviewing the guidelines and the workshop, we're going to continue with beginning our 2-year review of Post field training program, which Crawford presented on earlier today. And Post has represented in the past that it is in the field training program where junior officers, where any type of bias is currently measured and tested through its field training. And given the link between bias and racial and identity profiling during the first year review, the board will work with 2 experts to better understand what field training entails, and to really delve deeper into what Crawford presented to us today in terms of the codification of certain aspects of the field training and the discretionary aspects of field training for LEAs and whatnot, and whether it's adequate in its current state. And during the second year of our review, the board plans to continue working with the experts to develop explicit recommendations for the field training program based on evidence-based research and interventions. So this is a 2-year endeavor, and as you all know, it's very important and critical to the work that the RIPA board does, and to its mandate of eliminating racial and identity profiling in California through our law enforcement agencies. And lastly, in this report, the board will provide concrete recommendations to Post and to the California legislature that aim to address issues related to racial and identity profiling and biased conduct that the board identified since the issuance of its last report in 2025. So I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Danielle.
Hi, everyone. Well, thank you, Marisol. That was a very comprehensive overview of the roadmap for this year's section of the Post portion of the RIPA report. And a lot of the information that we'll include with respect to Post's response to the prior board-supported recommendations, we heard today from the Post representatives who shared about the progress that's been made in 2023, 2024, and 2025 supported recommendations. And so this section will feature those responses and also continue to develop any further information that we received from Post and summarize all of that here. Next slide, please. And then, as Marisol stated, and as we've gone over earlier in this meeting, there were 2 workshops that POST held that board members participated in, and will continue to update. They will continue to update us on the progress of implementing the recommendations from those workshops, and all of that will be summarized here. And so we heard today that POST is still working on the guidelines for racial identity profiling courses. Those are being changed, and we'll summarize the findings and any recommendations that the board may have to the final work product that POST produces with respect to guidelines. And then for AB 443, the definition of biased conduct, as the board members shared today, there was several recommendations on the definition that were discussed and put forward, and POST is discussing that proposed definition from the workshop at their June 4th commission meeting. So that's already on the agenda, and they will vote on the adoption of that. And so we'll summarize all the information in this section of the report as well. And that is all from me, and I'll pass it on to my colleague, Aisha.
Hi, good morning, everyone. With respect to the field training program, the first year review will be an opportunity to educate you, and today was a great beginning of that overview of the field training in terms of what does it consist of, what are all the components. So firstly, you'll be looking at the field training program in the relationship to AB 953, which is simply your requirement and mandate by the legislature to review the course. You'll also look at any of the materials, all of the materials related to this. And the representative from POST, Stephen Crawford, pointed you to Section 6 of the field training program. There are like 18 competencies, but as it relates to POST's update of the field training program related to bias, the focus is going to be on Section 6, namely 6.3 and 4. And 6.3 is cultural diversity, 6.4 is racial profiling, and it's under the umbrella program of competency 6, which is community relations and professional demeanor. And I'd just like to just take a second here, and this is really important, and it's been mentioned earlier, that all of these 18 competencies tie back to the learning domains. And Mr. Crawford indicated that there were 42 of them. And for you all, this would be, as mentioned earlier, also LD3, which is principled policing in the community, and LD42, which is, I can't think of the title, but it is the primary 2 courses that the new officers take in the classroom. And so the 1,064 hours is a combination of what the new officers got in the classroom, and is now going to be the extension of their work in the field. And in fact, I'd like to just state that POST has earlier recognized that successful completion of the academy is not just the completion of the coursework in the classroom, but successful completion means the individual is sufficiently prepared to enter the field training. So this is a transition. So the board since 2016 has looked at several courses, 2 of the learning domains, and several in service. So now you're coming back after looking at all those courses, and it's going to close the loop and thread the needle through the classroom courses of LD3 and LD42 with what experience and exposure that the officers get in the field. So when you looked at LD3 and LD42, you also looked at the Museum of Tolerance training, and that leads me to the next bullet of trainees and field training officers. So you'll be looking at what is the training that the trainees are getting in the field, but you'll also be looking at what training and direction and guidance and continuation or through line that the field training officers are applying from the training that the officers got in LD3 and LD42. So that makes it a total comprehensive review by the 8 racial identity profiling courses, that POST has updated and that the board has been mandated to review. And in terms of the evaluation, one of the things that you'll be looking at is how the field training officers are evaluating the trainees. And again, just to elevate POST's position on this, in your 2025 response report by POST did indicate, which is great, that in their opinion, the most effective way to evaluate and measure a recruit on the topic of bias is in the field training program. And that's because that's where they go immediately following the regular basic course. So this is the last course in terms of the large 8, and it is probably the most important as it relates to new officers, because everything culminates and goes into the actual application of what they've learned in the classroom. So that, next slide, please. So that leads us to the next section of the report, which is going to be your recommendations. After looking at the materials, hearing from folks like Stephen Crawford and Megan and POST, and research and information that experts have found, then you will culminate all of that, do your review as it relates to the curriculum and points that the legislature has identified in AB 953 that each of these courses should contain. And you will include your recommendations both to POST and the legislature, which is what you routinely do every year. So that concludes my presentation. So I will turn it back to you, Marisol.
I think it's now time for anyone who has questions for us, for the three of us. If there's anything that you want to share about this outline for the POST section of the 2026 report, if there's anything that you feel is missing, we obviously want to hear your feedback.
So we will open it up now to any questions, but also feedback, other comments from our subcommittee members. Officer Green.
Good afternoon, ladies. Thank you very much. Is there any evaluation on biases for people entering the academy? Maybe not even something that's graded, but something that gives you a baseline on where your potential students or your students are before training, during training, and maybe during the FTO program, so we can see if any of this training is sinking in with those who scored one way or the other on that test.
That's a great question. I'm going to answer to the best of my ability. From what I understand, there's several regulations that require officers to be screened before they enter the academy for any biases, and this is part of like recent legislation. And those screenings include like social media, maybe some evaluations, and then I don't think that is tracked though after the initial like hiring process. And I also do not believe that there's anything that is a consistent test that demonstrates any progress or method of tracking how a trainee is doing in their development of these skill sets as it pertains to racial profiling and bias. That is definitely something the board is interested in. And I think you articulated it well and is an expression of the continued recommendation that you've put forward with respect to measuring the effectiveness of these trainings. Something like that would be very helpful, I think, especially when we're seeing different stages of the training and including that in field training in that testing method.
Thank you. I just one quick follow-up. I see a lot of officers who get in trouble for whatever the bias is, whether it's age, sexism, whatever the case may be. And there's always a quick, not always, oftentimes, training and the department is scrutinized. Is this an ongoing thing? Is this something that's taught? Is it, forget all that stuff you learn in the academy, this is how it is on the street. It would be nice to see what people are bringing to the table from just their background and their upbringing. So maybe the scrutiny isn't quite so much on the department or on post. Maybe the scrutiny should be on the individual and maybe the background process instead of the whole group. Just my thoughts.
Now, and if I can just comment on that, during the AB 443 workshop, one of the 5 groups with SMEs was tasked with trying to beef up the process of doing these background investigations with a biased so to ensure that you don't hire folks who already have all these biases that will then impact the way different law enforcement agencies are policing on the ground. So that is a process that I think post and as you heard earlier today, based on SB2 and the relationship between SB2 and AB 443 is really thinking about more intentionally. Angela?
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, please, Angela.
Oh, great, thank you. One is just kind of logistical. So as I understand it, that in our next meeting, we may be then discussing kind of the materials that we were directed to today from Mr. Crawford, the section 6.3, 6.4, as well as the LD3 and LD42. It would be helpful if we could maybe all have links to those materials to make sure we're looking at the most updated versions. I would really appreciate just if we could email us or provide it in the chat so that when we come to the next meeting, I understand we should be prepared to talk about those. And then the question I have is on the last slide, I realized, well, maybe I might be a little bit confused about year 1 and year 2. So the year 1, we're looking at these materials and we may have recommendations based on the materials. Is then year 2 going to be about implementation and reviewing that? I realize I'm unsure now how we're breaking up the 2 years.
I can start and then my colleagues can. The first year is really to get a lay of the land and really understand what's happening, which is why today was so important to get Post to share with us how they, think of the FTP program or the FTO program. And then through our experts, really delve in and do some observations of some field trainings, talk to rank and file officers, junior officers, sergeants, lieutenants to figure out, as we learned that the FTP very differently for an agency in Northern California and for an agency in Southern California to really understand some of those differences, what they entail, what are some of the best practices some of these law enforcement agencies are engaging in, and really provide that sort of transparency to the and to folks who will be reading the report. And then year 2 will really be about, well, given that this is what's happening, what are some areas that really need improvement? And here are some best practices based on other agencies, or maybe we'll be highlighting some of the agencies in California that are doing a great job. Maybe we'll be highlighting some programs in other states or taking place in other countries, some aspects of those programs that we feel could really help our agencies here in California.
Great, got it. Okay, and so probably the bulk, we don't know yet, but the bulk of our recommendations might be year 2.
Yes.
Okay. Okay,
Yes.
that's what I originally, that is very helpful. Thank you.
And if I could add to that, so think of it as year 1, you're getting all of this information and you will be provided assistance with going through and understanding what all the parts are. And again, Post did an excellent job to give you a high level overview, and it's real clear who the expert is over at Post now. So, and then, so the end of year 1, you're going to be given, you're going to be asked to go back and look at the framework of the statute, because the legislature laid out a roadmap. And in addition to what Marisol had indicated, you're going to be looking at it from the standpoint of what are the requirements or the components that the legislature recommended that each of these courses contain. And that's consistent with the way you have reviewed prior courses, is you get the information, look at the materials, and then go back to the statute to see what are the 4 or 5 elements that the legislature said. And that will be kind of a general, a basic foundation. But again, adding to that, what should a course contain? So that's.
Thank you.
Hopefully.
Other questions? Didn't want to miss Luanda either, because I think she is still here. Luanda, there you are. Did you have any questions? No. I have a few questions myself. Based on our discussion today, would there be an opportunity to address the issue that I surfaced that we saw in the training overview that a number of us attended back in the fall, which is ensuring that post-training material or recommending that post-training material include a robust discussion of the fact that this is not, in fact, individualized data that is shared with anyone, but only shared in the aggregate. So I wanted to ask sort of if that could be included and perhaps how. I see some nodding.
Sure, I definitely think that can be addressed. We will note your recommendation, include it in our conversations with Post and in our recommendations. And I think that's an important concern to keep in mind as we review the materials for the field training and continue to incorporate that into our feedback as we go along. But definitely we'll continue to note it and have conversations with Post about it.
And, you know, I just want to add for the folks who are not at that training that are part of our subcommittee, I have to tell you that when this particular fact was cleared up for those trainers, it completely changed the dynamic, because they then understood not only for themselves, but individuals that they are training, which is to say, largely California's police force, that there is this misconception, and it really, I think, limits not only our relationship, but the desire to adhere to the RIPA requirements, and you know, as I've said multiple times, a real reticence on that level. So when they understood that, and my hope was that they could then communicate that to individuals they train, then people will not have that fear and anxiety that they're currently working under. So that is my first point. Angela, did you have a point related to that, or was it a separate point? Okay, please.
Yeah, no,
go
just
ahead.
related to that, 'cause I do agree it's an important point. And in light of, you know, Megan's comment about it, you know, one way we may want to consider approaching it is, where is the best place to get the word out? You know, is it an academy versus field training, or is it someplace else so that officers who are not new also become aware of it? You know, but yeah, so maybe it's like less specific on when it happens, but it really, you know, needs to happen. And maybe that's something for us to consider, or for then Post to consider, where is the most effective avenue for that.
I agree completely. Thank you for that. My next comment was about something that Stephen said, which is that 75 to 78% of agencies use post materials, et cetera, and resources, but obviously that leaves 22 to 25% who don't. What I heard him indicate is a desire for there to be regulatory action to make that so, to make it 100%. So I wonder if there might be, we can look into what that might look like. Certainly if it's his desire and it's something we also support, his meaning post desire. I do think consistency, uniformity are key, throughout the state. And I think it's clear that Post spends a lot of time and energy on all of their training materials and resources. So that would be one that, depending on the language, I would advocate for. Any thoughts from DOJ or other members of the subcommittee?
I definitely think it's worth having continued conversations with the Post team members about what sorts of what sorts of recommendations would be helpful to them and what sorts of remedies they're interested in. And one of the goals we have this year is to bring Post in to those conversations earlier with respect to recommendations and get some feedback. So we can definitely collaborate on some of these and come to hopefully a solution that's amenable to both parties.
Great. And then my last one is regarding who is allowed to conduct, what outside vendors are allowed to participate in the trainings of law enforcement officers as it pertains to racial bias and racial profiling. As I understand it, and please correct me if I'm wrong, it is only limited to one agency. There's no process for who can apply for it, who can, show competency for it. And as someone who generally doesn't believe in monopolies, I don't believe in one here. Especially given that there are so many organizations that are true experts in this field, have amassed data, have engaged in the research in a really thoughtful and comprehensive way. That would be, if it's appropriate, a recommendation to open up processes so that many entities can avail themselves of the contracting and then be a positive force for Post. And apologies if this is something that we've covered in the past, but it's not coming top of mind.
I believe your understanding is correct. I will have to get back to you on identifying or confirming if there's any process for any outside vendors to approve, to be approved to conduct this training. But from what I understand, that would be the Museum of Tolerance, and that is the only organization that provides the racial bias or identity profiling training. And last year in the 2025 report, the board did recommend that the legislature expand the potential, or expand the organizations that can provide this training. But I can research that and get back to you more concretely.
Well, and then was there any action taken based on our recommendation?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay, so that may be the other thing, is if it's already in there, and give me 1 second, Officer Green, but if there's one, if it has, as you stated, it's in the earlier report, then we can do some offline work to make sure that members of the legislature are aware of it and can act on it as appropriate. So it may not need to be in this report, but if there are additional steps that we could take. So please, Darren.
Thank you. Just going back to the 75 to 80% who are using post, so that would leave 25 to 20% that aren't using the post curriculum. Can we find out how or why they're not? Could it be a funding issue? Because I would hate to see something get mandated, and now these folks need to annually change their training and send people to training, which could cause, you know, a hardship down the line, because all that money eventually flows from the same place. Is that something we can look into before mandating it?
Absolutely. We'll look into that. Thank you.
Thank you for that question. And that's actually something I asked Stephen, and I don't feel like he, it's clear from your question that he didn't answer it. I don't know that he answered it for me either as to why they were not participating. I think he gave a few, may have touched on an answer or so, but certainly wasn't comprehensive in helping us understand what the issues might be. So I'm glad we're on the same page there. Angela?
Yeah, on that same topic, it'll be interesting to find out the size of those departments, because it may be an issue of, you know, how Mr. Crawford was saying, you know, some departments have, you know, 2 or 3 officers, and, you know, and that could be a really important consideration. So I think as we're collaborating with Post, and maybe we invite them again to the next meeting to further discuss, like, you know, this topic, and to see, you know, what is already known, or what is information that still we need to, or as a state need to find out about this. Yeah, I think all these are important, you know, considerations.
Yeah, thank you. I would like to add that it is difficult to quickly stand up a field training program. Not every CHP office receives new officers from the academy. We got new officers when I was stationed here in the North Sacramento office. We've got 2, actually, during the course of the time I was there, we got 7, and that was the first time in probably 30 years that office received new officers. So not only do you have to stand up the program, you have to get the sergeant who is in charge of it, you have to send them to training, and then you have to get the field training officers training. And that requires scheduling, that requires travel. For us, you know, with going from North Sacramento to Sacramento, traveling wasn't an issue, but for a small rural police department, that could pose a hardship.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I actually had the opposite sort of assumption, which is that smaller agencies would avail themselves of the training because it would be so much work and so, tedious for them to create their own trainings, that they would be more likely to, and perhaps bigger agencies like LAPD and others would have their own, and just because they have so many officers. So I think it would be good to get that information of what the characteristics are for those that do and those that don't. Is it a monetary issue? Is it another issue? And then C2, I also wasn't even clear to me about the fact that there was a cost, but of course I'm not in this field. So Officer Green, if you have any information you can shed about that, if you know what, for example, the costs are to your agency from Post, or is this something that comes with membership, how that works?
Thank you. Simply sending officers to field training officer training can be a cost in its own, because I went very long time ago our field training was, I was in Los Angeles at the time, and our field training happened to be in the San Diego area, and it was a week long. So I've got travel down there, which was no big deal in my own car, but then you've got 5 days in a hotel, of course, per diem, and then it's not just me. There's probably 20 people in the class, and then 4 or 5 instructors, guest instructors that were highway patrol, and then the 2 facilitators. So you're looking at about 30 or 40 people. And that was just for, at the time that I was working in Los Angeles, that's our Southern Division. And that was just for Southern Division personnel. So that's about 40 people over the course of a week where you're paying for board and per diem. So if you're not local, I've worked in the desert as well, and sending an FTO from the great city of Blythe back to San Diego is the same thing. There's a decent cost there, even if you're traveling on the state's dime and you're getting the state rated hotels. I mean, as you know, San Diego's still expensive even with the state rate. So just the travel alone could be a hardship for a smaller municipality.
Got it.
And then
Thank you.
you talk about scheduling as well.
Right. No, that's really helpful information. Thank you for sharing that. Other comments, feedback, questions regarding the outline? Want to make sure not to miss any. Okay. Well, it looks like that is it. Was there anything in addition that DOJ wanted to add before we move on in our agenda, which would next be to public comment? No? Okay, great. Thank you so much, Marisol, Danielle, and Aisha, for your amazing work now and always. Really, your support is invaluable, and we so appreciate your attention to detail, your thorough analysis, and look forward to seeing the report as it continues to be developed. Thanks so much. And then now I think we are ready to move to public comment. Yasi, may I ask for your assistance in this endeavor to make sure that we are getting public comment from all of those who wish to speak? Yeah, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Co-Chair Kulkarni. We can begin with comments from Northern California. So if any folks from Northern California have any questions or comments for the board, please feel free to raise your hand, or if I can't see you, if you're not able to raise your hand, please feel free to jump in. So anyone from Northern California? I see we have Karen Glover with her hand raised.
Hi, folks. Thank you for everything. Can you hear me? Okay, I have 2 comments. One was from early in the meeting today, and I believe it was Danielle who was talking. It was about the desert island and implicit bias discussion. I would, I guess, recommend that you either include other types of scenarios or move away from the desert island scenario for the implicit bias discussion, and you make it more real. Desert island discussion, it's kind of fantasy type thing, and these are real everyday engagements with implicit bias. You might try something like a hoodie kind of scenario. You might look into some work by Eduardo Bonilla Silva. His book, Racism Without Racists, goes into coded language. The Racial Justice Act in California is looking at implicit bias, so it kind of taps into some of that work that's going on right now in California. but that desert island scenario, I think, is somewhat removed from the real work that needs to be happening now. And then my second comment, I posted it in the chat. And I know we all have a lot going on and we're in really difficult times right now, but I was really surprised that no one on the important RIPA board, you know, at the end of all the discussion with Mr. Crawford, that no one took a moment to just point out to Mr. Crawford the work that y'all have been doing and the real pattern of racial and other kind of profiling that's been going on. And after all that discussion that he brought up, he ends up saying that he doesn't really hear a lot about race. And that just was just a stunning comment for someone that has such an important role in post, to end his discussion saying he doesn't really get a lot of input about race. And then for no one to comment on it was also equally stunning. But I know y'all have a lot going on and you're always doing important work. So thank you for that. And that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Karen. Are there any other comments from commenters from Northern California? I see we had Michelle Whittick, your hand is raised.
I'm actually in Southern California. Can you hear me? Oh,
can
this
hear
is
you.
wonderful. I must have done something better to my computer at this meeting than at the last one. Is it okay to speak even though I'm in Los Angeles? Yeah.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, great. Yes, I noted the definition of biased conduct and really appreciate the work that's gone into that. Having just heard it, I'm not sure that I have it correct, but my notes say any behavior motivated by bias based on a target's individual characteristics or group membership. If that's a good approximation, I'd like to go on from there to ask how such conduct can be assessed. A couple of considerations. One is the officer's behavior at the time that the assessment is being made. If the officer, for example, uses a verbal slur, that makes it pretty easy. But another consideration is of course, the circumstances. The presence or absence of a suspect description, for example, evidence of a pattern or practice that is unexplained, but has a strong racial disparity that can't be explained by any other way. The second consideration is the agency's policies that allow pretext or investigatory stops. A common justification that I've heard so many times is we use these stops because we find hidden criminals. The example of Timothy McVeigh is heard over and over and over again. But this kind of justification for pretext stops, which I think are a circumstance under which a lot of biased conduct occurs, doesn't take into account the cost in terms of distrust from the community and decreased perception of police legitimacy. So my comment really is to appeal to the board to take a stronger advocacy role in getting law enforcement agencies to curtail their pretextual or investigatory stops, at least for those that are non-safety related infractions. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Are there any other comments from Northern California before we move on to Southern California? And again, feel free to jump in if you're not able to raise your hand. I can only see so many folks on my screen. So if there's anyone that is from Northern California that would like to make a comment and can't raise their hand, please feel free to do so. But if not, is there anyone from Southern California that would like to make a comment? And if not Southern California, anyone from Central California? All right, well, hearing nothing and seeing no hands, I think this concludes the public comment section of the meeting. If folks have other comments that they were not able to make verbally today, please feel free to drop those in the chat and those will be recorded. Otherwise, we can turn this back to Co-Chair Kulkarni.
Great, thank you so much, Yasi. And thank you everyone for sharing your public comments. These are really important and we really value your thoughtfulness, your consideration and your insights. It's really important to the work we do and we know that these meetings are long and certainly can be long for individuals from the public. So thank you for sharing those with us verbally as well as in the chat. So now I believe we are moving on to the discussion of next steps. And so I did want to ask once again for help from DOJ regarding our meeting schedules and sort of what we can expect in the coming weeks in terms of the development of the report, when we will be meeting, and other relevant information.
Sure, thank you for that. I can give a brief overview first just on the upcoming meetings. So for the rest of the subcommittee meetings, we have 3 more coming up in the next 2 weeks. We have the policies subcommittee meeting, which is tomorrow, May 22nd, and that's from 10 a.m. to noon. And then we have 2 subcommittee meetings on Tuesday, May 27th. The first is Stop Data, which is also going to be from 10 a.m. to noon. And then we also have the Accountability and Complaints Subcommittee meeting, which is also the afternoon of May 27th from 1 to 4 p.m. Beyond that, the full board meeting is scheduled for July 11th. That meeting will take place from 10 to 2. And from there, we'll go ahead and schedule the 3rd round of subcommittee meetings, which will be the final round of subcommittee meetings for the year, followed by the third full board meeting and the 4th full board meeting. And those are to wrap up and finalize the publication of the report. In terms of the draft development, we will be, our teams will be revising the draft outline that was provided to you all today based on the feedback and the discussion that took place during this meeting. Our hope is to get a revised version of that to you in advance of the full board meeting, and then to continue developing the report so that you have a close to final version for the 3rd subcommittee meeting, which will likely be in August or September.
That sounds great. Is there anything else then for us to discuss at today's meeting? And let me ask you first, and then I'll ask members of our subcommittee.
I just want to give an opportunity for a post team in case they have any questions. I think it sounds like that was wrapped up during the discussion section of the agenda, but just in case if anyone from the DOJ post team here has any questions or needs direction further from the board, this is the opportunity to do that. And if there's no questions or comments from our team, we can go ahead and pass it back to the board members to discuss if there's anything else that you would like to see included or any other questions you have regarding next steps.
That's for our DOJ team, right?
It is. But hearing nothing from our team, I think we can go ahead and pass it back to you, Co-Chair Kulkarni, and the rest of the subcommittee members. If there's anything else that you'd like to see included in the post section of the report, or if you have anything else you'd like to discuss in terms of next steps.
Great. So I turn now to our honorable members of the subcommittee. Any final thoughts, questions, comments, words of wisdom before we end our meeting? So I'm seeing none. Godspeed to everyone as we move into the long weekend. And thank you so much. I do really appreciate everyone's time and attention to these very important matters. Want to again thank, I don't think they're still on, but Megan and Stephen from Post and all of the DOJ staff that have put in so much work into making our RIPA board a success, and specifically our subcommittee. And I want to personally thank Angela, Darren, and Lawanda, as well as Ronnie, for attending today's meeting, and look forward to seeing you at other subcommittee meetings and or the July RIPA board meeting. So I hope everyone has a very safe and restful long weekend, and look forward to seeing you all again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Well.
much.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.